It'll be a catastrophe whether or not they win or lose. Because in order to fight a ground war, the United States would have to institute a national draft where a young man as young as 18 would be forced to join the army and be sent to fight in Iran, okay? So that's the first big question for us. Will the United States send in ground troops?
It would be a catastrophe whether or not they win or lose. Because in order to fight a ground war, the United States would have to institute a national draft where young men as young as 18 will be forced to join the army and be sent to fight in Iran. That sentence was not spoken by an anti-war protester, and it was not broadcast on a fringe podcast. It was not whispered by a disgruntled Pentagon insider who leaked documents to the press. That was Professor Jiang Xueqin, Yale-educated game theory professor, the man who predicted Trump's return to power, the man who predicted the US-Iran war before it started, China's Nostradamus, as the Economic Times, the Hindustan Times, and Wyon have all called him, sitting in front of a camera using his game theory framework, making the prediction that every American parent with a son between the ages of 18 and 26 needs to hear before it becomes a headline. A national draft, not a possibility, not a worst-case scenario to be avoided. According to Jiang's game theory analysis, a structural inevitability if the United States chooses to do the one thing that everyone inside the Pentagon and everyone outside it who has looked at this war honestly knows is the only way to actually win it. Send in the ground troops. And here's the part that no cable news anchor has said clearly enough. Jiang's 3 questions. The 3 questions, he says, will determine not just the outcome of this war, but the fate of the world, are already being answered. On the streets of Tehran, in the drone exchange rates over the Persian Gulf, in the Kospi circuit breakers in Seoul, in the Goldman Sachs $150 oil projections, in the rumors, unconfirmed but spreading, that the 82nd Airborne Division has already received deployment orders. Will the U.S. launch a ground invasion? Will nukes be used? Will the Al-Aqsa Mosque be destroyed? Jiang made his predictions. He said, yes, ground invasion. No nukes. Yes, Al-Aqsa. And he said something else, something that every financial analyst, every portfolio manager, every parent of a draft-age son, and every person who owns dollars needs to understand before the answer becomes obvious. For my theory to be valid, I have to be correct on all 3. If I miss one, all my theory is wrong. He is 0 for 0 so far on being wrong. By the end of this video, you will understand the 3 questions, the game theory that produces Jiang's predictions, the economic trap that makes the ground invasion a catastrophe, whether America wins or loses, and what the only rational financial position is for a world where an 18-year-old American might be getting a draft notice before the end of this year. Jiang's framework is not complicated. It is uncomfortable. There are 3 questions, 3 binary outcomes, and the combination of those 3 answers determines whether the 21st century belongs to a declining American empire desperately trying to maintain petrodollar hegemony, or to whatever comes after it. Question 1. Will the United States launch a ground invasion of Iran? Right now, air war, siege warfare from a distance, 2,000 sorties per day, Operation Midnight Hammer, Operation Dawn Fury, Tomahawk missiles, JDAMs, carrier-based airstrikes. As long as it stays an air war, Jiang says, America can still choose to de-escalate. It would lose. The loss would be humiliating. The petrodollar would be damaged. Dollar hegemony would begin its structural decline, but the loss would not be catastrophic. America could withdraw, absorb the humiliation, restructure, reposition, survive. The moment ground troops go in, mission creep activates. The escalation ladder locks. And America is trapped in Iran for 5 to 10 years minimum. Jiang's word, catastrophe. Not defeat, catastrophe. Whether they win or lose. Question 2. Will nuclear weapons be used? Jiang said he is 100% confident nukes will not be used at this time. And then he said something that only a game theory professor would say with complete equanimity. If I'm wrong, I apologize to the world, but we'll all be dead anyway, so it doesn't really matter. His reasoning, and this is important, is not optimistic. It is structural. Israel's nuclear doctrine is the Samson option, a strategic arsenal, not a tactical one. Converting a strategic arsenal to tactical deployment is not a simple military bureaucratic decision. The chain of command required. The doctrine required. The Allied permissions required. Russia has told the Americans and Israelis, according to Jiang's analysis, that it considers Iran an indispensable ally. Sergei Lavrov confirmed Russia views Iran as a relationship of indispensable strategic importance. And Jiang predicts, at some point, Putin will place Iran under the Russian nuclear umbrella, meaning any nuclear weapon used in Iran will be considered a direct attack on Russia. That constraint alone, not morality, not international law, but the cold game theory calculation that a nuclear strike on Iran triggers Russian response, is what Jiang believes prevents nuclear escalation. Not forever, not unconditionally, but at this time, in this war, at this point on the escalation ladder. Question 3. Will the Al-Aqsa mosque be destroyed? This is the one that the Western media is least equipped to discuss and most resistant to taking seriously. The Al-Aqsa mosque in Jerusalem is the third holiest site in Islam. Muslims believe it is from Al-Aqsa that the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven. Religious Jewish extremists, who Jiang says have taken control of the Israeli state, believe the mosque sits on the site of the third temple that must be rebuilt. There is a rabbi on YouTube, Jiang cited him directly, who described the plan openly. Wouldn't it be wonderful if during a war an Iranian missile hit the mosque and the Arabs and the Persians would fight each other? Those are his literal words. Jiang's prediction? Yes. The Al-Aqsa mosque will be destroyed. And when it is, whether by Iranian missile or by controlled demolition blamed on Iran, 2 billion Muslims will be religiously obligated to go to war against Israel. Not politically motivated, not ideologically driven, religiously obligated. This is Jiang's Pax Islamica trigger, the civilizational activation event that transforms the US-Iran war from a regional conflict into a war between the American empire and the expressed religious will of a quarter of the world's population. 3 questions. Ground invasion. Yes. Nukes? No. Al-Aqsa? Yes. If Jiang is right on all 3, his theory is valid. If he is wrong on one, his theory is wrong. He has been right about everything else. Before we go further into the ground invasion, we need to understand Jiang's game theory framework for why the escalation ladder analysis produces the conclusions it does. Because this is the insight that Mearsheimer described in tactical military terms, and that Jiang describes in civilizational terms, and that every financial analyst is describing in price of oil terms, and all 3 are saying exactly the same thing from 3 different vantage points. Jiang's law of escalation: control is more important than dominance. Let me explain what that means, because it is the single most important concept for understanding why the United States cannot win this war on the terms it has defined. Dominance means having the bigger weapon. America has dominance. America has nuclear weapons. Iran does not. America has the most advanced air force in history. Iran does not. America has carrier strike groups. Iran does not. By every conventional military metric, America has escalation dominance, and yet Jiang says dominance is not what wins the fight. Control is what wins the fight. Control means calibration, structuring your response strategically in a way that achieves your objective, maintains your legitimacy with spectators, and preserves your options at every step. Iran has control. Iran is calibrating every move, hitting the Bahraini desalination plant to demonstrate capability, not to destroy it, closing the strait to strangle the global economy without triggering a specific act of war, preserving the bulk of the missile arsenal, 80,000 Shahed drones, mobile ballistic missiles firing from the sand where you cannot see the launchers, for what Mearsheimer called the Goddard-Damerang moment, and what Jiang calls the strategic reserve. Iran is not throwing punches randomly. Iran is climbing the escalation ladder with focus, clarity, and resolve. The 3 advantages, Jiang says, come specifically from remaining calm and controlled while your opponent overreacts with dominance. America is overreacting with dominance. 2,000 sorties per day, Tomahawk missiles, JDAMs, decapitation strike on the supreme leader, claims of destroying the nuclear program, claims of sinking 10 Iranian naval vessels, claims that it is well ahead of schedule. And yet, oil at $119, Goldman Sachs projecting $150, UAE a week away from running out of interceptors, the 82nd Airborne with rumored deployment orders, Iran still firing, still calibrating, still climbing. Jiang's bully metaphor makes this precise. The bully has dominance. He's the biggest kid in the school. Everyone pays his tax. Everyone obeys out of fear. But the new kid, Iran, in this metaphor, does not need to beat the bully in a straight fight. The new kid needs only to demonstrate that being punched by the bully is survivable, that the bully is not, in fact, invincible. The moment that demonstration is complete, every other kid in the school starts recalculating their relationship with the bully. The GCC countries are recalculating right now. China is watching and recalculating. Russia is watching and recalculating. Every American ally in the region is watching BAPCO issue a force majeure and a Bahraini refinery burn and a desalination plant get hit, and recalculating. The bully's power was always the hallucination. The hallucination is shattering. And when the hallucination shatters, the bully has only 2 options: retreat and lose all credibility, or strike harder to kill the new kid, to restore the fear that makes the hallucination work. America cannot retreat. The petrodollar requires the credibility. The credibility requires the demonstration of force. The demonstration of force requires escalation. And escalation, at this point on the ladder, means ground troops. Let us address the rumors directly, because Jiang addressed them directly. Rumors that the 82nd Airborne Division has had its training canceled and has received deployment orders. Unconfirmed, not verified by mainstream media, but spreading in the same way that early intelligence on every major military escalation always spreads before the official announcement. Jiang's assessment: a ground invasion is coming, not because it is a good idea, not because it can succeed, but because the game theory of the escalation ladder makes it structurally inevitable given the political constraints on every player. Here's the logic. And this is the part that Mearsheimer confirmed from his entirely different analytical framework. The air war has not produced regime change. Decapitation did not produce regime change. Destroying the nuclear program did not produce regime change. Sinking 10 naval vessels did not produce regime change. The escalation ladder says when the current rung fails, you either back off, as Trump did with the Houthis, or you double down and go to the next rung. With the Houthis, Trump backed off. That was the exception. It was remarkable. It was rare. With Iran, the strategic stakes are categorically different. The Houthis could not destroy the petrodollar. The Houthis could not collapse the GCC. The Houthis could not trigger a civilizational war involving 2 billion Muslims. The Houthis could not give China the Taiwan window. Iran can do all of those things. The political cost of backing off Iran is therefore categorically higher than the political cost of backing off the Houthis. Trump cannot be seen to lose to Iran and then claim the petrodollar is safe. Trump cannot be seen to lose to Iran and then credibly deter China over Taiwan. Trump cannot be seen to lose to Iran and then project the image of American dominance that is the entire basis of the petrodollar arrangement, so he will not back off. And the next rung on the escalation ladder, after air war, after decapitation, after regime change attempts through proxies, is ground troops. Mission creep, Jiang's term, is already beginning. Maybe it starts with 1,000 troops to secure a nuclear site. Maybe it starts with the 82nd Airborne in a limited objective operation. It always starts limited. It always starts with a purpose that sounds specific and achievable. And then the limited mission does not achieve its objective. And the next limited mission does not achieve its objective. And the one after that. And slowly, as it did in Vietnam, as it did in Afghanistan, as it did in Iraq, the mission creeps. And the troop numbers creep. And the timeline creeps. From weeks to months to years. And at some point, Jiang's specific prediction, the troop numbers are large enough that the only way to sustain them is to do the thing that America has not done since 1973, institute a national draft. Before we get into exactly what this means for the global economy, I want to take a very quick pause. I want you to listen to something very important, because I have a specific message directly for you. If you are still watching this breakdown right now, you are officially in a very small and elite minority of people. The vast majority of the internet is completely distracted by short attention spans and meaningless entertainment today. The fact that you have made it this deep into such a complex strategic analysis proves you are entirely ahead of the curve. You possess the rare focus and discipline required to actually understand how the global board is moving before everyone else does. Right now, it is early evening on this Tuesday, March 10th, 2026. Wherever you are watching this strategic breakdown from today, I would love to know exactly who is in our community. Wherever you are watching this strategic breakdown from today, I would love to know exactly who is in our community. Please drop a quick comment below with your city, your local time, and what the weather looks like outside your window. Reading your comments and seeing our global reach is genuinely one of my favorite parts of creating these deep dives. While you are leaving that comment, please take 1 second to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support tells the algorithm that you value serious geopolitical research, and it helps engineered markets grow stronger every single day. I truly appreciate you being here and taking the time to engage with this level of research. Let me know where you're watching from, and let us get right back to the analysis. The national draft is the phrase that turns this from a geopolitical analysis into a financial analysis. Because a national draft does not just put soldiers in Iran. A national draft restructures the entire American economy. Let us model what that actually means. Because no financial institution has published this analysis, and the absence of it is the single most dangerous gap in the current market's understanding of where this war is going. Jiang said, young men as young as 18. The last American draft ended in 1973. The generation that was drafted for Vietnam is now in their 70s. The generation that would be drafted for Iran has never known a world where military service was not entirely voluntary. 60 to 70% of Americans were against this war before it started. Mearsheimer cited this figure explicitly. A national draft, compelling 18-year-old Americans to join the military and deploy to Iran in that political environment, is not just a military policy. It is a domestic political detonation. The political polarization that already exists, the one that Mearsheimer described as a governing capacity crisis, multiplied by a national draft. produces the American Civil War scenario that Jiang's predictive history identifies not as a shooting war, but as a complete collapse of governing legitimacy. Congress cannot pass budgets. Congress cannot agree on debt ceilings. Congress cannot agree on anything. And Jiang is asking Congress to authorize a national draft for a war in Iran that 60 to 70% of Americans opposed before it started. In a moment when oil is at $119, gas is at $3.48 and rising, diesel is up 24%, and every family in America is already paying the financial cost of a war they did not want. The economic consequences of the draft scenario compound through every sector simultaneously. The labor market loses its youngest, most productive cohort. Not through unemployment, through military deployment. Small businesses built on young labor, restaurants, construction, retail, technology startups, face labor shortages at exactly the moment when input costs from energy are already surging. Let us assume the draft happens. Let us assume 500,000 American soldiers are staged and deployed. What does Jiang's game theory say happens next? The answer is in 2 words, 93 million. Iran has 93 million people living in a mountain fortress, the Zagros Range, the Alborz Range, thousands of kilometers of terrain where you can embed command infrastructure, supply networks, missile batteries, and drone launch sites in rock that cannot be neutralized from the air. Jiang addressed the 82nd airborne scenario directly. Parachuting any amount of soldiers into the middle of Iran is just pure suicide. They are bound to be either killed or captured, which would be completely humiliating for Trump and Netanyahu. The proxy strategy, using Kurdish forces, Sunni ISIS insurgents from Iraq, Azerbaijani proxies from the north, has already partially failed. Jiang confirmed the Kurds have refused the American offer. The human intelligence networks that Israel spent years building inside Iran, the ones that were designed to support exactly this kind of operation, were burned in the 12-day war. The color revolution infrastructure, the Mossad agents embedded among protesters, the cyber terrorism networks, the paid protest movements, were discovered and dismantled when Iran closed the internet and jammed Starlink. The intelligence substrate that a ground invasion requires has been destroyed. And Iran, Jiang confirmed, is more unified than at any point in its modern history. The Iranian government is much more coherent and unified than ever before. 93 million people, united, resolute, Shia martyrdom doctrine activated, fighting on their own territory, in their own mountains, against an invading force that has no coherent strategy, no proxy support, no human intelligence network, no manufacturing base capable of sustaining a 5 to 10 year ground war, and a domestic population that is 60 to 70% against the war it is being asked to die for. This is Vietnam. This is Afghanistan. This is the escalation ladder that Mearsheimer said has no magic solution at the top, except worse. Because Vietnam did not have the petrodollar mechanism. Afghanistan did not have oil at $150. Iraq did not have Iran's missile reserve. And none of them had the Al-Aqsa trigger waiting to activate 2 billion Muslims simultaneously around the world. Jiang's third prediction is the one that the Western financial media is structurally incapable of analyzing. Not because the analysis is complex, because the implications are so large that stating them clearly would require acknowledging a scenario that no investment bank can publish without triggering the very panic it is describing. The Al-Aqsa Mosque. Jiang confirmed the rumors. The Israelis have shut down the mosque. The suspicion, unconfirmed, is that they are preparing a controlled demolition that can be blamed on an Iranian missile. There's a rabbi on YouTube who said it openly. His exact words, which Jiang quoted, "Wouldn't it be wonderful if during a war an Iranian missile hit the mosque and the Arabs and the Persians would go fight each other and those animals would kill each other?" Those are not extremist fever dreams. Those are the stated preferences of a religious faction that has taken control of the Israeli state's decision-making apparatus, and that believes, along with a significant portion of American evangelical Christians, now embedded in the U.S. government, that destroying the mosque and rebuilding the Third Temple is a fulfillment of biblical prophecy that hastens the return of Jesus Christ. Jiang noted that American soldiers are explicitly discussing the eschatological dimension of this war. American officials are talking in apocalyptic terms, hurrying on Armageddon not as a metaphor, but as a literal strategic objective shared by powerful factions in both the American and Israeli governments. When the Al-Aqsa Mosque is destroyed, and Jiang predicts it will be, 2 billion Muslims around the world will receive a religious obligation to go to war. Not a political motivation, not an ideological preference, a religious obligation. The Pax Islamica activation that Jiang and Professor Jiang have described across multiple lectures becomes the civilizational response to the civilizational provocation. And at that point, the financial implications make $150 oil look like the nostalgic good old days. Think about the Muslim populations of every American ally in the region: Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, Algeria, UAE, Pakistan, Turkey. all of them governed by U.S. client regimes that maintain power through American military backing. All of them home to Muslim populations that will now be religiously obligated to go to war against Israel and against every government that sides with Israel in that war, including the governments that host American bases, including the governments that price oil in dollars, including the governments whose sovereign wealth funds are the structural bid underneath the U.S. equity market. The petrodollar end 2026, in the Al-Aqsa scenario, is not a decade-long gradual process. It is an acute rupture, the kind of rupture that turns $150 oil into the scenario that the CNN analyst described when he said the sky is the limit. And then beyond the limit, you would be putting a bottle of oil in the Louvre. That was the exact phrase used in the interview. Not $200? No price. Because when the entirety of Arabian Peninsula oil infrastructure is simultaneously under attack from a religiously mobilized quarter of the world's population, there's no functioning oil market to price. Jiang identified one scenario where this cascade can be interrupted: the Trump-China grand bargain. At the end of this month, Trump is scheduled for a state visit to Beijing, the first sitting American president to visit China in 8 years, one of 3 planned summits between the two nations this year. Jiang's prediction: people will be surprised and shocked by what will happen. China and America are, in Jiang's framework, symbiotic and codependent. America needs China's manufacturing capacity and consumer base to sustain its economy. China needs American markets and access to global energy to sustain its export economy. Both nations are damaged by this war. China imports 75% of its oil and 60% of its total energy supply from the Middle East. With the Strait closed, with Qatar having shut down LNG production, China's energy supply chain is under acute stress. The grand bargain Jiang predicts: China agrees to buy American oil rather than Iranian oil. America gets an economic partner that stabilizes dollar demand. China gets energy security outside the Iranian supply chain that is now a war zone. And the Iran war, at least the escalating phase, gets a negotiated pause. The irony that Jiang identifies: Trump started the Iran war partly to strangle the Chinese economy by blocking Chinese access to Middle Eastern energy. And the resolution of the Iran war may require Trump to invite China into a direct energy trading relationship that further legitimizes Chinese geopolitical authority and accelerates the very multipolar world order that the Iran war was supposed to prevent. In both scenarios, whether the grand bargain happens or whether the escalation continues toward ground invasion, the petrodollar is weakened. The grand bargain weakens it gradually through yuan-denominated energy trade and Chinese geopolitical legitimization. The ground invasion weakens it catastrophically through 5 to 10 years of quagmire, a national draft, domestic political collapse, and the Al-Aqsa trigger that activates the civilizational response. The only question is the timeline. Jiang used the word catastrophe, not defeat, catastrophe. Whether the United States wins or loses the ground war, the outcome is catastrophe. Let us be precise about why. The catastrophe if America loses the ground war: 500,000 soldiers deployed, national draft instituted, young men 18 years old in Iranian mountains, no proxy support, no human intelligence network, unified Iranian population of 93 million people, Shia martyrdom theology activated at maximum intensity, Russian intelligence support for Iran continuing, China watching and waiting for the Taiwan window. The war grinds for 5 to 10 years. The defense spending, funded by money printing, not petrodollar recycling, generates inflation that compounds annually. The domestic political polarization, amplified by draft resistance, by casualties, by the economic pain of sustained $150 oil, produces the governing capacity collapse that Jiang identifies as America's internal catastrophe. The empire does not fall from external defeat. It collapses from internal fragmentation, the same way every empire in Jiang's predictive history has eventually collapsed. The catastrophe if America wins the ground war. Wait, wins? Jiang said wins would be catastrophe too. Why? Because winning requires 500,000 soldiers in Iran for the duration. Because occupying Iran means occupying a country of 93 million people who are now more unified than at any point in their history. Because the insurgency that follows military victory, in a country where martyrdom theology makes death the activation code, not the deterrent, makes the Afghan occupation look like a summer vacation. And because while America is occupying Iran, with 500,000 soldiers deployed, its manufacturing base depleted, its interceptor stockpiles exhausted, its precision-guided munitions cannibalized from South Korea, China takes Taiwan. Mearsheimer said it directly: if you're the Chinese thinking about capturing Taiwan, all you have to do is wait a year or so if this war lasts that long. America wins the ground war in Iran. America loses Taiwan. America loses its dominant Pacific position. America loses the technological and manufacturing relationship that its entire economy depends on. And the petrodollar, which requires American credibility as the global security guarantor, loses its remaining rationale. Catastrophe, whether you win. Catastrophe, whether you lose. That is Jiang's three-word verdict on the ground invasion. And that verdict, translated into financial terms, is the most important macro variable that no investment bank has published a model for. 3 questions, 3 predictions. 1 framework. Ground invasion, yes, coming. Nukes, no. Constrained by Russian umbrella. Al-Aqsa, yes. The civilizational trigger. If Jiang is right on all 3, and he has been right about everything that preceded this, the financial consequence is not complicated. The dollar is the instrument of American imperial power. American imperial power is the enforcement mechanism of the petrodollar. The petrodollar is the structural reason the rest of the world holds dollars. A ground invasion that traps America in a 5 to 10 year Iranian quagmire, that requires a national draft, that drains the manufacturing base across 4 simultaneous theaters, that depletes precision munitions while China waits for the Taiwan window, destroys the military credibility that makes the petrodollar worth enforcing. A national draft that triggers domestic political collapse, that turns the 60 to 70% of Americans who were already against this war into a governing majority demanding withdrawal, destroys the political will to maintain the military presence that makes the petrodollar worth defending. And an Al-Aqsa destruction that activates 2 billion Muslims simultaneously, that topples the US client regimes that price oil in dollars, that destroys the GCC sovereign wealth funds that are the structural bid under US equity markets, destroys the geographic and economic infrastructure that makes the petrodollar physically possible. All 3 executing simultaneously on a timeline that Jiang says is measured in months, not years. Dollar risk 2026, understated. Petrodollar collapse Iran. The mechanism, not the metaphor. Economic collapse 2026, the output of the mechanism. Debasement dollar 2026, the monetary translation. And the assets that exist outside the breaking architecture. Gold, silver, Bitcoin. The professor who predicted Trump's return. The professor who predicted the Iran war. The professor who is now predicting a ground invasion, a national draft, and the 3 questions that will decide the fate of the world, is not asking you to trust him. He is asking you to evaluate his game theory framework against the facts as they are unfolding in real time. Oil at $119, check. Goldman Sachs, $150. Projection, check. Bapco force majeure, check. Bahraini desalination plant hit, check. 82nd airborne deployment rumors, check. Kurds refusing American offer, check. Iran more unified than ever, check. The framework is not wrong yet. The question is whether you position yourself before it proves right on the remaining predictions, or after. A draft notice going to an 18-year-old American does not come with advance warning for portfolio adjustments. Real assets outside the architecture before the next question gets answered. Jiang said it clearly, explaining that the Americans were looking for a pretext and the 3 demands were designed to be impossible. The negotiations were conducted by 2 ardent Zionists who wanted war regardless of any Iranian concessions. What does it mean for the off-ramp that Trump keeps claiming is available right now? Especially when the mounting evidence suggests there was absolutely never an intention to take it. That is exactly what we will be covering in the next strategic breakdown on this channel. If this framework connected the 3 questions that absolutely no financial program is connecting for you, share it with one person who has a draft-age son and thinks this is just another Middle East war. Because it is not another Middle East war, it is the 3 questions that decide the fate of the entire world. And Professor Jiang Xueqin confidently answered all 3 of those critical questions for us. Now, if you're still watching at the very final second of this deep dive, I have a specific message just for you. You possess the rare discipline and intellectual stamina that completely separates the actual strategists from the retail noise. Most people cannot handle this level of complex truth, but the fact that you are still here proves you are entirely ahead of the curve. Drop the exact words "I see the truth" in the comments below, so I know exactly who the real researchers are in our community. I see the truth. Please subscribe and leave a like because the answers are arriving much faster than the market is actually pricing them.